The courthouse hallway echoed with her laughter, sharp, cruel, and deliberate. Victoria swept through the double doors with her hand possessively wrapped around Derek's arm, her lover of 18 months. She wore a blood-red dress that clung to her figure, a statement piece chosen specifically for this moment. Her heels clicked against the marble floor like a countdown to what she believed would be my complete destruction. I sat alone at the defendant's table, my worn briefcase resting against the chair leg. My suit was off the rack, clean but unremarkable. To anyone watching, I looked exactly like what Victoria had been telling everyone I was, a washed-up software engineer who'd spent our entire marriage buried in a basement office, tinkering with code while she built her real career in marketing. "Look at him," Victoria whispered loudly enough for half the courtroom to hear. "Still wearing that pathetic suit from our wedding. Couldn't even afford a new one for his own divorce." Derek snickered, squeezing her waist. He was everything I appeared not to be. Tall, athletic, expensively dressed. He worked as a senior operations manager at TechFlow Industries, a mid-sized tech firm that had recently gone public. Victoria had met him at a corporate networking event, and according to the private investigators' reports, they'd been inseparable ever since. Judge Patricia Holloway entered, and we all stood. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with steel-grey hair and eyes that missed nothing. I'd done my research on her too. Fair, methodical, and utterly intolerant of theatrics. "Please be seated," she said, reviewing the files before her. "We're here for the divorce proceedings of Victoria and Mitchell versus Thomas Edward Mitchell. I've reviewed the initial filings. Mrs. Mitchell, your attorney may begin." Victoria's lawyer, Richard Pemberton, was a shark in a three-piece suit. He stood with practiced confidence, laying out Victoria's case with theatrical precision. According to him, I was a financial drain on the marriage, a man who'd refused to advance his career, who'd turned down promotions to stay in entry-level positions, who'd contributed minimally to our household while Victoria climbed the corporate ladder. "My client has been the primary breadwinner throughout this marriage," Pemberton declared. "Mr. Mitchell has shown a consistent pattern of underachievement and financial irresponsibility. We're seeking an equitable division of assets, which includes my client's substantial retirement accounts, her investment portfolio, and alimony payments to help her maintain the lifestyle she built despite Mr. Mitchell's failures." Victoria nodded along, dabbing at fake tears with a tissue. Derek rubbed her shoulder supportively from the gallery, and I watched her lean into his touch. The performance was masterful. I'd lived with this woman for 12 years, and even I almost believed her. "Mr. Mitchell," Judge Holloway said, turning to me, "do you have representation?" I stood slowly. "I'm representing myself, Your Honor." The courtroom rippled with murmurs. Victoria's smile widened. This was going even better than she'd planned. A man too cheap or too poor to hire an attorney was about to go up against one of the state's most expensive divorce lawyers. "Very well," the judge said, though I caught a flicker of concern in her expression. "Do you wish to make an opening statement?" "I do, Your Honor." I opened my briefcase, removing a single folder. "I'd like to start by addressing the characterization of my career and financial contributions to this marriage. My wife is correct that I never pursued promotions in traditional employment. What she's failed to mention is why." Pemberton waved dismissively. "Your Honor, we don't need to hear excuses about Mr. Mitchell's lack of ambition." "I'll allow it," Judge Holloway interrupted. "Continue, Mr. Mitchell." I pulled out the first document, and I saw Victoria's expression flicker with the first hint of uncertainty. "Your Honor, for the past 15 years, I've been the founder and majority shareholder of a company called Sentinel Digital Solutions. We specialize in cybersecurity infrastructure for enterprise-level corporations. Last year, we were acquired by a larger firm, but I retained 63% of the controlling shares as part of the merger agreement." The silence in the courtroom was sudden and absolute. "The current market valuation of my holdings is approximately $247 million. Victoria's face drained of all color. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Pemberton shot to his feet, his carefully maintained composure cracking like ice under pressure. Victoria's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, her hand gripping Derek's arm so tightly her knuckles turned white. From the gallery, I heard Derek mutter a curse under his breath. Judge Holloway's gavel cracked 3 times against the bench. Order! I will have order in this courtroom. The noise subsided into tense whispers. She turned her sharp gaze on me. Mr. Mitchell, these are extraordinary claims. I assume you have documentation. Extensive documentation, Your Honor. I approached the bench with my folder, handing copies to both the judge and Pemberton. Corporate filings, tax returns for the past 10 years, certified statements from our accounting firm, and the merger agreement from last year's acquisition. Everything has been properly reported to the IRS and is a matter of public record for anyone who knew where to look. Pemberton's hands trembled slightly as he flipped through the pages. His theatrical confidence had evaporated, replaced by the dawning horror of a man realizing his client had lied to him about everything. Victoria had sold him a story about a deadbeat husband, and he'd built an entire case on that foundation. Now the ground was shifting beneath his feet. Your Honor, Pemberton stammered, I need to request a recess to review these documents with my client. We were not made aware. Because your client never asked, I interrupted calmly. Victoria knew I worked in software development. She knew I spent long hours in my home office. What she didn't know was what I was building there. I kept my business interests separate from our personal life, maintained in a trust established before our marriage. Under state law, premarital assets and their appreciation remain separate property. Victoria found her voice, shrill and desperate. You're lying. You're some kind of low-level programmer. I've seen your tax returns. You've seen the tax returns for my W-2 income from the small consulting work I did on the side, I corrected. The business income was filed separately through the corporate structure. You never asked to see those returns, Victoria. In fact, you stopped asking about my work 3 years into our marriage. You said it was boring tech stuff that didn't interest you. Judge Holloway studied the documents with meticulous attention. These appear to be in order, Mr. Mitchell. Mr. Pemberton, did your client provide you with any financial discovery regarding her husband's business interests? Pemberton looked at Victoria, who had tears, real ones this time, streaming down her face. My client informed me that her husband was essentially unemployed, doing occasional freelance work. She provided his personal tax returns, which showed minimal income. Because I took a modest salary, I explained. The wealth was accumulated through equity appreciation and strategic reinvestment. I live below my means, Your Honor. I always have. It's how I built the company in the first place. Derek had gone pale in the gallery. I watched him pull out his phone, his fingers moving frantically across the screen. He was putting the pieces together faster than Victoria. TechFlow Industries. Sentinel Digital Solutions. The merger. Your Honor, I continued, there's another matter relevant to these proceedings. As part of the merger agreement, Sentinel Digital Solutions was acquired by TechFlow Industries. I retained controlling interest, which means I currently own 63% of TechFlow. The phone slipped from Derek's hand, clattering to the floor. Judge Holloway's eyebrows rose. And this is relevant because Victoria's companion, Derek Hastings, is employed as Senior Operations Manager at TechFlow Industries. He reports to the executive team, which reports to the Board of Directors, which answers to the controlling shareholders. I pulled out another document. This is Mr. Hastings' employment contract, which includes a morality clause regarding relationships that could pose conflicts of interest to the company. Victoria whirled around to look at Derek, who had slumped in his seat, his head in his hands. Furthermore, I added, company policy explicitly prohibits relationships between employees and individuals connected to controlling shareholders without disclosure and approval. Mr. Hastings has been in a relationship with my wife for 18 months. During that time, he's been present at my home, had access to my personal computers, and could have potentially accessed confidential information about Sentinel's proprietary technology. Pemberton was frantically whispering with Victoria, but she wasn't listening. She was staring at Derek with growing horror. You knew, she hissed. You knew who he was. Derek's silence was answer enough. Judge Holloway set down the documents. Mr. Pemberton, I'm granting your request for a recess. I suggest you have a very thorough conversation with your client. We'll reconvene tomorrow morning at 9. Mr. Mitchell, please provide complete financial disclosure to opposing counsel. And Mr. Hastings, she fixed Derek with a withering look, I suggest you consult with your own attorney. As the judge exited, Victoria launched herself toward me, her carefully constructed facade completely shattered. You bastard! You let me think you were nothing. You let me believe. I let you believe exactly what you wanted to believe, I said quietly. I never lied about my work, Victoria. You just never cared enough to ask. The following morning, the courtroom had a different energy entirely. Gone was Victoria's triumphant red dress, replaced by a conservative navy suit that screamed damage control. She sat beside Pemberton, who looked like he'd aged 5 years overnight. Derek was notably absent from the gallery, though I'd received a frantic email from him at 2 in the morning, begging to meet. I'd declined. Everything that needed to be said would be said here. Judge Holloway took her seat and immediately turned to Pemberton. Counsel, have you had adequate time to review the financial disclosures? Pemberton stood, his movements stiff. Yes, Your Honor. My client would like to amend her initial filing. We're withdrawing the requests for alimony and division of retirement accounts. We're asking only for an equitable split of marital assets acquired during the marriage. That seems reasonable, I said, standing. I've prepared a complete accounting of marital assets. I distributed copies. The house we live in was purchased with funds from my premarital trust, so it remains separate property. However, improvements made during the marriage, the kitchen renovation, the landscaping, the addition, those were funded with marital income. I've had 3 independent appraisers value those improvements at approximately $180,000. I'm prepared to offer Mrs. Mitchell $90,000 as her share. Victoria's jaw clenched, but Pemberton put a hand on her arm before she could speak. I continued. The vehicles were both purchased during the marriage. The BMW Mrs. Mitchell drives is paid off, valued at $42,000. My truck is valued at $18,000. I propose she keeps the BMW, I keep the truck, and I pay her $12,000 to equalize the difference. What about the joint accounts? Pemberton asked. The savings, checking, investment accounts in both names. Mrs. Mitchell has already withdrawn $93,000 from our joint accounts over the past 6 months. I produced bank statements. Wire transfers to her personal account, cash withdrawals, purchases of jewelry and other items not in her current possession. I've documented every transaction. The remaining balance in our joint accounts is approximately $27,000. I propose we split that equally, and Mrs. Mitchell returns the $93,000 she removed, or we offset it against other assets. Victoria's face flushed red. Those were my earnings. I had every right. They were marital funds, Mrs. Mitchell, Judge Holloway interrupted. Continue, Mr. Mitchell. There's also the matter of Mrs. Mitchell's retirement account, which she built during our marriage. Under normal circumstances, I'd be entitled to half of the appreciation that occurred during our marriage. However, I'm willing to waive any claim to her retirement funds entirely. Pemberton looked suspicious. In exchange for what? In exchange for a full and complete settlement with no alimony, no future claims against my business interests or their appreciation, and Victoria's agreement to sign a comprehensive NDA regarding my business operations and any information she may have been exposed to during our marriage. An NDA. Victoria spat. You want to silence me. I want to protect my business interests, I corrected. You've spent 18 months in a relationship with an employee of a company I control, Victoria. An employee who had access to our home, our computers, our private spaces. I need assurance that no proprietary information was compromised. Judge Holloway leaned forward. Mr. Mitchell, are you alleging corporate espionage? I'm alleging the possibility existed, Your Honor. Mr. Hastings had the means, motive, and opportunity to access confidential information. Whether he did so is a matter I'm investigating separately, but I need to ensure that possibility is contained. Pemberton and Victoria huddled in urgent conversation. I could see the calculation happening behind Victoria's eyes. She'd come into this courtroom expecting to walk away with half of everything, plus alimony. Now she was staring at a settlement that would give her maybe $200,000 total, and that was if she agreed to my terms. Your Honor, Pemberton finally said, we need time to consider. No, Victoria interrupted, standing abruptly. No, I want to speak. I have the right to speak, don't I? Judge Holloway nodded carefully. You do, Mrs. Mitchell, though I'd advise you to consult with your attorney first. I don't need his advice anymore. Victoria turned to face me fully, and for the first time since I'd known her, I saw something genuine in her expression. Not love, we were long past that, but something like respect mixed with bitter regret. You were always smarter than I gave you credit for. I thought you were weak. I thought you were content to be small while I became something bigger. I thought Derek was everything you weren't, successful, ambitious, powerful. He was an operations manager, Victoria. I hired operations managers. She laughed, a broken sound. I know that now. Derek told me everything last night. How he'd known for months who you were. How he'd been trying to get close to you through me, hoping to leverage the relationship into a promotion. How he'd been photographing documents in your office when I thought he was just using the bathroom. The courtroom went silent. Judge Holloway's expression hardened. Mrs. Mitchell, you realize you're making very serious allegations. I'm making a confession, Victoria said. I was a fool. A greedy, selfish fool who thought she deserved more than what she had. Thomas gave me a comfortable life. He never cheated, never lied, never raised his voice. He worked hard at something he loved, and I mocked him for it. Then I fell for a man who was using me to get to my husband's money. She looked at me with tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean anything now, but I'm sorry. I nodded slowly. I believe you are. But sorry doesn't undo the damage, Victoria. It just acknowledges it. Judge Holloway called for a 15-minute recess after Victoria's confession, but the real action was happening in the hallway. Through the courtroom's glass doors, I watched Pemberton make urgent phone calls while Victoria sat alone on a bench, her head in her hands. 2 courthouse security officers had been stationed nearby, standard procedure when potential criminal activity was mentioned in proceedings. When we reconvened, there was a new presence in the courtroom, a federal agent named Special Agent Rebecca Torres from the FBI's Corporate Crimes Division. She sat in the gallery with a tablet and a grim expression, taking notes. Judge Holloway addressed the room. Before we continue with the divorce proceedings, I need to address the allegations Mrs. Mitchell made regarding potential theft of proprietary information. Special Agent Torres is here to determine if federal investigation is warranted. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm going to ask you some questions under oath. You understand you have the right to consult with an attorney before answering. Victoria looked at Pemberton, who nodded reluctantly. I understand, Your Honor. I'll answer. Did you have direct knowledge that Mr. Derek Hastings was photographing or otherwise copying documents from Mr. Mitchell's home office? Not at the time, Victoria said, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought he was just using the bathroom or getting water. But last night, he admitted that he'd been taking pictures of anything that looked important. He said it was insurance in case things didn't work out between us. He wanted leverage. I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. Derek had been even more foolish than I'd anticipated. Special Agent Torres stood. Your Honor, with your permission, I'd like to ask some follow-up questions. Granted. Torres approached the witness stand. Mrs. Mitchell, did Mr. Hastings ever ask you to provide him with passwords, access to computers, or to leave specific documents out where he could see them? Victoria's eyes widened as memory struck. Yes. He asked me several times about Thomas's computer password. I told him I didn't know it. Thomas always kept his work computer locked. But Derek asked me to check Thomas's desk for notebooks or written passwords. He said he was just curious about what kind of work Thomas did. And did you check? I looked once. I found a notebook, but it was just full of code and technical notes. Nothing I understood. I told Derek it was useless. Do you still have access to that notebook? It should still be in Thomas's office desk drawer. I spoke up. Your Honor, I'm willing to provide that notebook and any other materials to Special Agent Torres for examination. I'm also prepared to provide access to my home security system footage. Victoria's head snapped up. Security footage. I installed cameras throughout the house 3 years ago, I said calmly. After we had that break-in scare in the neighborhood. You remember, you picked out the system yourself. You just never asked where all the cameras were positioned. The color drained from Victoria's face. The office has 3 cameras. Different angles. All motion activated, all backed up to cloud storage. I looked at Special Agent Torres. I believe you'll find several instances of Mr. Hastings entering my office alone and photographing documents over the past 18 months. I noticed the intrusions 6 months ago and began leaving specific documents in strategic locations. Pemberton groaned audibly. Please tell me you didn't. I did, I confirmed. I created false documents containing plausible but entirely fictional technical specifications. Patents that don't exist, projects that were never in development, strategic plans for expansions that were never considered. If Mr. Hastings shared any of that information with competitors or attempted to use it for personal gain, it would be immediately identifiable as coming from those fake documents. Judge Holloway almost smiled. That's remarkably thorough, Mr. Mitchell. I build security systems. Your Honor. I understand how to create honeypots for corporate espionage. Special Agent Torres made notes on her tablet. Mr. Mitchell, I'll need access to those files and the security footage. This is now officially a federal investigation into potential theft of trade secrets and corporate espionage. Mrs. Mitchell, you're not currently under arrest, but I strongly advise you to obtain criminal counsel in addition to your divorce attorney. Victoria looked at me with something approaching desperation. Thomas, I didn't know. I swear I didn't understand what Derek was doing. I thought he just wanted to feel closer to you, to understand your work. I was an idiot, but I wasn't trying to steal from you. I believed her, actually. Victoria had always been self-centered and opportunistic, but she'd never been strategic enough for genuine espionage. She'd been a useful fool for Derek, nothing more. Your Honor, I said, I'd like to move forward with the settlement discussion. Whatever criminal matters exist are separate from the dissolution of this marriage. Judge Holloway nodded. Agreed. Mr. Pemberton, does your client accept Mr. Mitchell's settlement proposal? Pemberton looked at Victoria, who nodded numbly. Yes, Your Honor. My client accepts. $90,000 for her share of home improvements. She keeps the BMW, splits the remaining joint account balance after returning the $93,000 in withdrawn funds. She retains her full retirement account, and she signs a comprehensive NDA regarding Mr. Mitchell's business interests. No alimony, no future claims. And Mrs. Mitchell agrees to full cooperation with the federal investigation, Special Agent Torres added, including testimony against Mr. Hastings if charges are filed. I agree, Victoria whispered. To everything. Judge Holloway made notes in her file. Mr. Mitchell, this settlement is remarkably generous given the circumstances. Are you certain you don't want to pursue additional claims? I'm certain, Your Honor. I just want this marriage ended cleanly. Victoria made mistakes, but she's also being held accountable. That's sufficient for me. What I didn't say, what I didn't need to say, was that I had other plans for Derek Hastings. Plans that had nothing to do with courts or federal agents. 3 months later, I sat in my home office, the same office where Derek Hastings had thought he was stealing my secrets, and reviewed the final documents. The divorce was finalized. Victoria had signed everything, taken her settlement, and moved across the country to live with her sister. The federal investigation into Derek had resulted in charges for theft of trade secrets and attempted corporate espionage. He was looking at 5 to 10 years if convicted. But that wasn't the end of Derek's story. That was just the legal component. The real ending came when TechFlow Industries' board of directors, acting on the recommendation of their majority shareholder, terminated Derek's employment with cause. No severance, no references, and a permanent black mark on his professional record. In the tech industry, where reputation meant everything, Derek Hastings had become unemployable. The fake documents I'd left for him to photograph had been particularly effective. He'd apparently shared some of that intelligence with a competitor, hoping to leverage it into a job offer. When that competitor realized the information was fabricated, they'd not only rescinded their offer but had contacted our legal team to distance themselves from Derek's actions. The betrayal had layers. My phone rang. I recognized the number, Victoria's new cell. "Hello, Victoria." "Thomas." Her voice was different now. Smaller, somehow. Worn down by consequences. "I'm calling to let you know I sent the final NDA back with my signature. My attorney looked it over. Everything's done. I received it. Thank you for being prompt." Silence stretched between us. Then, "Can I ask you something? Why were you so generous? After everything I did, you could have left me with almost nothing. Legally, you probably should have." I leaned back in my chair, looking at the framed photo on my desk, not of Victoria, that had been removed months ago, but of the Sentinel Digital Solutions team at our first major product launch. 15 brilliant people who believed in my vision when it was just code on a screen and wild ideas scrawled in notebooks. "Because destroying you wouldn't have given me anything I needed," I said finally. "I built my company because I love solving problems, creating systems, building things that last. You were never the problem, Victoria. You were just a symptom of a marriage that had been over for years, and neither of us had the courage to admit it." "I loved you once," she said quietly. "In the beginning." "I know. I loved you too. We just grew into different people." And Derek? Derek was never about love. He was about ambition without ethics, shortcuts without wisdom. He thought he could take what I'd built without understanding that the building was the whole point. The money, the success, those were byproducts of work I would have done anyway. His going to prison. Probably. That's what happens when you confuse access with accomplishment. Another pause. "Are you happy, Thomas? Now that it's all over?" I considered the question honestly. Was I happy? My marriage had failed. I'd been betrayed by my wife and targeted by her lover. The divorce had been expensive in emotional currency, even if I'd come out ahead financially. But I was also free. Free from a relationship built on fundamental misunderstandings. Free from someone who saw my passion as weakness and my focus as failure. Free to build the next phase of my life with the same dedication I'd built my business. "I'm content," I said. "And I have clarity. That's worth more than happiness." "I hope you find both," Victoria said, and there was genuine warmth in her voice. "You deserve them. You always did. I was just too stupid and selfish to see it." "We both made mistakes, Victoria. The difference is what we do with the lessons." After we hung up, I returned to my work. Sentinel Digital Solutions was developing a new security protocol, something that could revolutionize how corporations protected their intellectual property. Ironically, Derek's amateur espionage had highlighted weaknesses in my own home security that had inspired several new product features. Even betrayal could be useful if you knew how to analyze it properly. 6 months after that, I was invited to speak at a tech industry conference about cybersecurity and corporate culture. During the Q&A, someone asked how I balanced work and personal life, given my success. "I don't balance them," I answered honestly. "I integrate them. My work isn't separate from my life, it's an expression of who I am." I spent years being told it was wrong, that I needed to want more conventional markers of success. But the truth is, I was already successful in the ways that mattered to me. I was just married to someone who measured success differently. The audience laughed, but there was understanding in it. After the conference, a woman approached me, Dr. Rachel Morrison, a fellow cybersecurity specialist who'd presented on ethical hacking. We talked for 3 hours about encryption protocols, system vulnerabilities, and the philosophy of digital privacy. She never once asked about my net worth or my company's valuation. She wanted to talk about the work itself, the elegant solutions to complex problems, the beauty of well-written code. We met for coffee the next week. Then dinner. Then we collaborated on a white paper about blockchain security. 6 months after that, she moved into my house, after I'd shown her every camera position and given her all the passwords. "You know," she said one evening, working beside me in the office where Derek had tried to steal my secrets, "most people would have trust issues after what you went through." "I don't have trust issues," I replied. "I have trust systems. They're much more reliable." She laughed, and the sound filled the spaces Victoria's bitterness had once occupied. The divorce had taught me something valuable. The truth has a weight to it that deception can never match. Victoria's laughter in that courtroom had been hollow because it was built on false assumptions. Derek's confidence had shattered because it rested on stolen foundations. But my quiet preparation, my careful documentation, my patient building of something real, that had substance, that endured. In the end, Victoria had walked into that courtroom thinking she held all the power, only to discover she'd never understood what power actually was. It wasn't about who earned more or who seemed more successful on the surface. It was about who built something lasting, who created real value, who had the discipline to play the long game. I'd won not because I was ruthless, but because I was patient. I'd won not because I destroyed them, but because I'd built something they couldn't touch. And most importantly, I'd won because when the truth finally emerged, I could stand behind it completely. That's a victory that lasts.